Welcome to Talk South Asian to Me Season 2. My name is Michelle.
And my name is Anusha. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. Central and hear us react to each other's stories about mental health and growing up in different South Asian households.
And remember, this podcast is not therapy. Engage with what feels entertaining and resonates with you and leave what doesn't.
All right, let's get into our session today.
Woohoo!
Today we are up to J. Yay.
I love that you said session.
Oh my God, I did, didn't I? I am not
I was
out
like,
of my
oh,
therapy
she's in
mode.
therapist mode.
So that, actually in one of my sessions with a client, I said a couple of episodes ago.
That's so funny. I love it.
I was like, oh my God, I'm watching too much TV. I think this is an indication. She was just cracking up. She was like, wow, same. Anyways, back to today's episode. Yeah, this is where episode actually makes sense. I got
There you go.
So on today's episode of our podcast, we're on letter J, and we're talking about journeying through therapy.
Ooh. I needed the sound effects.
Thank you for that. I needed a little bit of a hype.
Yes, there you go.
I love this topic. Of course, I'm a therapist. I am always ready to talk about therapy and the journey of it. So I'm excited because I get to present this topic. Yay!
And you're an expert. You're like the guest expert for this topic.
I'm the guest expert for this. That is true.
There you go. There you go.
And as usual, I wanted to maintain our unexpected structure of starting with the definition. So I thought I would just define what therapy is.
There you go.
Yeah.
Our listeners can expect from our episodes what we start off with. It's great.
Apparently from now on, you can expect definitions first.
There you go. Some education.
Yes. So I turned to our favorite source, Psychology Today, a lot today. And to define it, I also turned to Psychology Today. So Psychology Today defines what therapy is as a psychotherapy, also called talk therapy, or more commonly referred to as just therapy, is a form of treatment that's aimed at relieving emotional distress and mental health problems. Provided by any variety of trained professionals such as psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, or licensed professional counselors like me. And it involves examining and gaining insight into life choices and the difficulties that are faced by individuals or couples or families. The therapy sessions refer to structured meetings between a licensed provider and the client with a goal of improving some aspect of their life. Psychotherapy encompasses many different types of treatment, and it is practiced by a range of clinicians using a variety of different strategies. The critical aspect, though, is that the client or the patient works collaboratively with the therapist and can identify improvements and positive changes over time. And most of these therapies that are widely used are well tested and deemed effective. They're also usually evidence-based.
There you go.
So though it may not feel comfortable at first because of stigmas or just the fear of the unknown of what it might feel like in seeking out therapy, there definitely are benefits of successful therapy. And the biggest one is it's usually pretty life-changing in some way.
It is. Yeah. I would agree.
Yeah. So to that end of really understanding what it's like, I thought I would break down today's topic in 4 little pieces. One is talking a little bit about the types of therapies, and then who therapy would be right for, what to expect in that journey of therapy, and then the last one, as always, tying it back to our roots, how South Asians might benefit.
I love it. I'm excited.
Yeah. Awesome. So let's get into it. I'm curious, Michelle, what are some of the types of therapies that you're familiar with? What have you heard of?
I know CBT, cognitive behavior therapy. And then I've also heard of EMDR, which is the eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. And then I know, I don't know if this is a type of more of a modality, right? Like couples therapy or marriage counseling, family therapy. I know those are different modalities that I've heard of. But that's kind of my knowledge a little bit about it. So I'm excited to learn more.
Well, you definitely listed the most popular ones at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah. As you said, right, therapy usually falls under different categories. You can either seek out therapy as an individual, where it's just you and the therapist. You can also seek out couples counseling, where it's the couple and then the therapist. You can also seek out family therapy, which is you and a member of your family or a few members of your family. And then group therapy, which is something that I think maybe not a lot of people have heard of, I'm realizing lately. So I thought I could describe it a little bit. Group therapy is where one or two clinicians, they typically facilitate this group of people, up to maybe like 15 max participants. And this format is really great for like more like educational settings, more like developing like skill sets, more focused on like support maybe around like specific topics. And it's really great for creating like a sense of support within like a community of other people who are going through the same thing that you are. So it's great for emotional safety and like connecting people.
Would support groups be like if they were led by licensed professionals, counselors, like would that be considered as group therapy, like support group?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, as long as it's led by a licensed professional, support groups are definitely considered group therapy. Yeah.
Okay.
And so to kind of talk more about what you're talking about when you say support groups, I imagine you're talking about like support groups for people who maybe have lost a loved one, or support group for people who have chronic illness, something like that.
Yeah.
And group therapy, I will also add, can be really helpful for people, not just in a social aspect and like a community building aspect, but also like financially, because usually group therapy is cheaper.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And then there's, of course, like this falls under individual therapy technically, but like for kiddos, young kids, and typically the most widely used therapy for that is play therapy, which I'll get into in a little bit.
I don't know why I didn't name that. I wrote like a whole research thing on it back in college. I guess I forgot about it. But yes, play therapy. That's a good one.
And I'm sure you use kind of parts and pieces of play therapy in your own work. I'm certain. Okay. So when you think about the kinds of therapies that exist, there are actually lots and lots and lots of therapies that exist. Like so many. But if you really had to break it down, they would be covered under a couple of different umbrellas. And then there's a bunch underneath that umbrella. So I'll talk a little bit about the umbrellas and like some specific ones that are maybe really popular. And I'll just highlight a few of those.
Okay.
So one of these umbrellas is psychoanalytic or psychodynamic therapy. This therapy, its primary focus is on uncovering and examining meaningful events or patterns from the past that may be influencing the person's current state.
Like retrospective, like looking back.
Yeah, exactly. So usually when we think of past, it's not just like immediate past. It could even be like childhood and like things that happened then and how they shape the person and who they are today, how they act today. But it can also be like a little bit more recent past too, like specific experiences, like your first relationship and your second relationship, or things like that when you're a little bit more grown as well. Play therapy, I thought we could talk about that because it technically falls under this category. Play therapy is about helping, children cultivate communication and interpersonal skills. And that's really helpful. This modality is really, really helpful because children aren't often expressive with their words, usually at that age. But in just kind of working with the child as they play, as like an active participant in their play, or just more of an observer, they can understand how the child expresses themselves, how they manage themselves, and they can use that play to help enhance their social skills and communication skills and help them process through their emotions too.
Yeah, that makes sense. They're not like a lot of children have not fully developed the skills to verbally express their emotions or verbally express how they cope, or even have healthy coping mechanisms or be able to develop that.
Exactly. The second umbrella I'll talk about is cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, technically, this is where some people disagree. They believe that cognitive therapy and then behavioral therapy are separate, but there's also a more recent like merge between those two. It's like you already said, right? CBT. It is a popular one. I usually tell people when they ask me, like, what kind of modality do you use? I was like, well, CBT, but I'm sure you've heard that everywhere because that is usually in this day and age a therapist's bread and butter. Everybody knows how to do it. Everybody uses it. And there's a reason that this is a very popular form of psychotherapy. It's because it combines the cognitive and the behavioral therapy to form a bit more of a holistic approach.
Mm-hmm.
CBT basically teaches clients or patients to recognize and challenge unhelpful or irrational thoughts that may be influencing their emotions and their behaviors. And the emphasis is on really understanding that connection between the thoughts, the emotions, and the actions, and developing a more balanced perspective and response, and learning how to change the thoughts to alter your feelings and alter what you choose to act on. It all comes down to
that
the
makes
thoughts.
sense. Yeah, it does. It really does. The power of the mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because our thoughts are essentially what make our reality, and our perception isn't always true. So it's important to always start with the thoughts. And then under this umbrella, there's also mindfulness-based therapy. Now, usually clinicians won't just use mindfulness-based therapy. They'll use it to supplement some other kind of type of therapy. Mindfulness-based therapy is basically where therapists will teach clients or patients to tap into their thoughts and feelings as they arise. So they teach them how to gain perspective and put space between themselves and their negative thoughts or their emotions. And research basically shows that mindfulness-based techniques are instrumental in decreasing symptoms of depression and or anxiety. And those are, one of the two leading reasons people seek out therapy.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that about that. That's awesome. Mindfulness. Is that like a newer type of therapy, would you say? Or it's been existing for a while?
I think it's a bit more, I would consider it more newer type, because if you're really looking at it, there might be pieces of that have been incorporated in other like longer known therapies, but to have it like really branched out and be like its own thing, it's kind of newer.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Then there is the other umbrella, our third umbrella, which is humanistic or client-centered. So in this approach to therapy, the patient is viewed as a whole and individual person. So in examining their choices and behaviors, therapists can aid patients in recognizing their strengths and capacity to take responsibility for themselves and their lives, and actively work towards evolving into a fuller version of themselves. It's really instrumental to also investigate how patients view the world and themselves within the world within this modality. And examining those connections can keep patients focused on the present here and now, and it allows them to become more active participants within that. Now, that's an umbrella. So in that umbrella of this approach, there are specific therapeutic approaches, like existential, for example. Existential therapy really is focused on helping patients identify and create meaning in their lives, basically.
Okay.
Then there's the person-centered approach, which this one's also really popular. This is all about basically viewing patients as experts on their own lives. And it's basically like a therapist's job to empower them to make choices that align with their goals, rather than basically telling them and knowing what's best for them. And another popular one usually is solution-focused therapy. So this is where the therapist helps you identify and define your problems and finding your solutions to them. And they do this in part by figuring out what is already working for you and what has worked for you in the past.
Those are really interesting. I mean, I can imagine like many therapists probably won't be like isolated. They'll kind of use a mix to like the kind of mix of different modalities to support the client the best, which is really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I think that most therapists might have 1 to 2, maybe 3 max of like their favorite modalities that they typically tend to work from. But overall, you can't be a good therapist unless you have some kind of integrative approach, because if you don't integrate all of these pieces to find what is the perfect fit in a customized way for your client, then they might be lacking in some area, right? Not the therapist is lacking, but like the treatment is lacking in some area.
Yeah, exactly.
So I have 2 more umbrellas to talk about. One of the umbrella is somatic and neuroscience based. This is one of the more recent ones I've been noticing, and it's fascinating because it incorporates psychology, understanding behaviors, understanding people, but also the neuroscience behind it. So literally like understanding your brain and how that works. Somatic methods are usually focused on the relationship between the body and the mind. They're based on research on how trauma and emotional pain embed themselves in the body and the nervous system, and how the trauma can be healed. These methods can help you get through those blocks that other therapy methods in the past may not be able to fully resolve, but they're not always the right fit for everybody.
That one is so fascinating. You're right. I love it.
Yeah, because it combines, the study of human nature, but also like how our brains work, and then combining both of those things.
Very, very.
One of the examples under this umbrella is what you said earlier, EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So basically this uses like eye movement and finger tapping and things like that to process and heal trauma. It's research-based, and a lot of people tend to have like really good results with that. But it is something that you need to have a therapist who's really, truly trained in this and experienced in this, because they're basically going to bring up the trauma so that you can process it.
Yeah.
So if they're not well trained in that modality, you're just re-exposing yourself. It does a bit more harm than good.
Right. It needs to be like very structured, or therapist needs to know how to help the client. I was going to say patient. How to help the client cope.
It goes back and forth. People say patients, people say clients. I prefer clients, but Psychology Today kept saying patient, patient, patient. So you're going to catch me saying that too. And my personal favorite under this umbrella is internal family systems, aka parts work. I'm pretty sure I've talked to you about this. I've talked to anybody who will listen to me about this because I love it. It's essentially, for those of you who've seen like Inside Out, that movie is based on this concept. And the idea is that we have parts to us, and when we react quickly, it's our part reacting. Whereas there's also this concept called the self, which is basically your consciousness or your ability to observe, where you can like just sit back and be like, I'm feeling really hungry right now. That is yourself. You are not hungry. You are feeling hungry, right? So the ability to be able to do that, in addition to other kind of modalities that we'll talk about, like CBT that we've already talked about, I have found to be absolutely transformational in people's lives, because this IFS parts work really helps people learn how to like understand their emotions, how to regulate their emotions, and how to heal deep traumas from the root so that they can see long-lasting effects.
Wow.
I use this a lot. Like I use this almost every single day with most of my clients for particularly like intergenerational trauma. That's a big one that this is really helpful for.
I've never
family trauma.
I've never like heard about this, but now hearing about it more, I can imagine how effective it is. It's amazing.
It's amazing. It really is. I could have a whole episode on this. The last umbrella I'll talk about is integrative or holistic therapy.
Okay.
So this one, basically, it's as it sounds. Instead of utilizing one treatment method, therapists will tailor their therapeutic approach to the patient's needs by introducing strategies and methods from multiple different types of therapy that we talked about already, and many more that we haven't. In this approach, the client and their concerns are viewed through this holistic lens, and interventions are selected to help the patients, achieve more meaningful results in therapy. For instance, a therapist might utilize cognitive behavioral therapy to help patients identify, challenge, and change their thoughts, while also applying techniques from, let's say, mindfulness-based approach to help them manage their stress, learn how to regulate their emotions. That's way more powerful than just using one, because it's just part of the picture. Some of the things that fall under this umbrella are things like animal-assisted therapy. So this is usually done with like dogs or horses, and there's actually research that states that animal-assisted therapy creates a sense of like genuine calm, safety, helps people regulate their emotions, helps decrease anger and stress, improve social interactions even, which that I found is a surprise. And, just basically soothe and teaches empathy, teaches bonding, which makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. And then there's art therapy. So this one is helpful for facilitating self-expression, healing, enhances cognitive and motor skills. And that can look like, this therapy can look like actively drawing or sculpting or painting or even like movement. Although that's its own therapy too. There's like movement therapy, dance therapy, yoga therapy. There's so many interesting and unique modalities within this integrative holistic therapy umbrella.
I love it.
That was a lot.
But it was really
this does
informative.
Not even scratch the surface. So
it was so informative. So I loved it.
Thank you. Yay. I'm glad. These are the ones that I think caught my eye immediately because they're the most known, or at least the most used. But there are so many different therapies that we haven't talked about, like heaps and heaps of them. I've scratched a tiny part of the surface. So if anyone's really interested in like really exploring all of that, definitely Google different kinds of therapies. There's a lot.
Yeah, I bet there's so much.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, while having a certain method might be like helpful and interesting, ultimately at the end of the day, it's not the most important thing. There's actually research that shows that your relationship to your therapist and having a strong like rapport, a strong like fit with this therapist is far more important and beneficial to the like success of the outcome than the type of modality that is used.
That makes sense. I feel like if a person doesn't have really good rapport with their therapist, there might not be a lot of therapy might not be as effective because there might not be that trust there to bring hard things up, to bring challenges up. I mean, I'll get into this in my story later too, of just like sometimes bringing things up that you're not proud of, like the thoughts that you're not proud of or behaviors that you have that you're not proud of. Like that's not easy in general. And bringing that up to a stranger that you don't have good rapport with, will be difficult.
Scary. Yeah, it's really scary. And that's exactly why the right fit in your therapist and a good relationship with your therapist is so important, even more than the kind of therapy approach they use. And we'll talk a little bit further down in my research about like what kind of things might indicate a good fit. But at the end of the day, just trust your intuition. If you don't feel like you can be comfortable, you can be honest, you can be authentic, you can be yourself and bring up something without that fear of judgment, perhaps it's not the right fit. And I say that with an asterisk of initially you're not going to feel that way because you are talking to a stranger. So as you're getting to build this rapport, you're going to feel nervous. You're going to feel like, I don't know if I want to bring up everything.
Right.
And that's totally okay. That's totally normal. But overall, if you have established enough sessions where you're like, I don't really see myself feeling like their warmth, their curiosity, their openness with me, I don't really feel safe to be vulnerable after a few sessions, maybe it isn't the right fit.
Right.
Yeah. So let's talk for a minute about who therapy is right for.
Okay.
Because while anybody can benefit from therapy, therapy isn't necessarily right for just anyone. And a big indicator of that is one, their willingness and ability to seek out therapy, to be open to concepts and to grow. In addition to that, I think it is a good idea to reach out for therapy when you are going through one of the following things I'll talk about. For example, if you're having trouble regulating your emotions, you feel like you're just blowing up with anger, or you're overwhelmed because you can't even seem to like bounce back like maybe you used to from emotions. I think that's probably a good indicator that maybe it's time that you do seek professional help. And understand why that's happening, understand why that shift is taking place. If you find yourself reaching more and more for unhealthy coping skills, like relying on substances too much or spending too much time watching TV, like video games too much, even reading too much as a way to avoid dealing with your life and the problems that you're facing, it's probably time to seek out therapy. If you're struggling to reach goals and you feel stuck, understanding why you feel stuck can sometimes really come about when you're working with somebody who's not in your life and who's just trained to help you navigate the stuckness, understand your patterns. That's also a good time. If you want to improve your relationships, but you're not sure why you're stuck repeating the same patterns, or you've tried, or you don't even know where to start, that's a good place to seek professional help too. If you want to just increase your self-awareness, everything's fine, but you just want to be more and more aware of yourself, your patterns, of what might be getting in the way, that's a good place to seek out help too. If you're going through any transitions, like a new job, a new city, new parent, a relationship ending, new marriage, those kinds of things, and you want emotional support and guidance as you adapt to the changes, therapy can be helpful for people like that. Obviously, therapy is definitely helpful for processing through traumatic events. Mm-hmm. It can also be helpful for people who find that their mood is maybe affecting their work, their responsibilities. They notice a change in their appetite or sleep. Probably time to figure out what's going on underneath.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And the last one is when you want to change unhelpful, negative thinking patterns that you just can't seem to. Mm-hmm. And this is by no means like an exhaustive, comprehensive list, but these are some of the top reasons that people, seek out therapy.
Yeah, I love it.
So now what I want to talk about a little bit is what can you actually expect in therapy? So I've compiled a list of things from Psychology Today and like my personal experiences and my clients' experience to come up with a bit of an idea of what that could look like.
Okay.
First, if you're looking for a therapist, it's a good place to start is, seeking out your insurance, seeing if your insurance's directory has anybody in network if you want to use your insurance.
Right.
Other options are also online directories like Inclusive Therapy, Psychology Today, SouthAsianTherapist.org, Therapy Den. There's a bunch out there.
Yeah.
But just kind of Googling maybe even like therapist for self-esteem or relationship therapist, in my area. That can also be helpful in populating some options. And when you are seeking out therapy, of course, this is a bit of a long-term commitment, right? So cost is important in considering that. Your insurance is important in considering that. And it's important to recognize that if you do choose to use your insurance, just be aware that there's going to be some information that the insurances are going to have. For example, when you submit claims to insurance, you have to have a diagnosis code. So that diagnosis could be anxiety, that could be depression, that could be adjustment disorder, which most people, that's what I give to most people, which it's like the mild filler diagnosis most therapists place, which just says that a person is going through an adjustment in their life, a transition in their life, and that's why they're seeking therapy. So it's kind of the therapists who don't like diagnosis, that's like our quote-unquote cop-out one, where it serves its purpose. It is a diagnosis that the insurance wants, but it doesn't give them too much information about the client.
Right.
But not everybody does that, right? So if you actually have like anxiety or depression, or some insurances don't cover adjustment because it catch on to that, then, just be aware like insurances will have that information and how many sessions you're doing, things like that. Other thing to mention that a lot of people don't seem to know all the time is when you are looking at therapy, you don't have just two options, in network or out of network, as in private. Even with out of network therapists, you might still be able to use your insurance benefits. You're just looking at a different category of benefits, out of network benefits rather than in network. So people who have like PPO plans, POS plans, usually they will have some benefits from that they can still use. And I mention that because more and more, a lot of people are turning to out of network, mainly because insurance is a pain for you as a client. It's also a pain for us as providers.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. So there's always options. And also if a therapist is like absolutely just private pay, they don't do any kind of insurance, still reach out if you feel like it's a good fit and just ask if they have sliding scales or reduced fee options. Most therapists will have a few slots available to be more affordable to clients.
Okay. I like that.
Once you get through all of that, a sliding scale option. But once you get through all of that, you actually get to schedule a free 15-minute consultation with most clinicians. That's what they offer. And this is your first time you get to talk to your therapist. So you get to talk about things like why you're seeking, counseling at the moment, what you're hoping to get out of therapy. You get to ask your therapist any questions you want to ask. Have they treated people that have similar issues as you? What's their experience? What kind of types of therapies, modalities do they use? You get to ask them questions just like they get to ask you questions.
Yeah.
And as you continue to try and figure out if you might be a fit in terms of what you're seeking and what you're wanting, then you can talk about things like logistical things. What is my fee? Do I use insurance? Do I not? Scheduling, will that fit as well? Things like that.
Right.
And to give everyone a bit of an idea, some things that your therapist might ask initially are things like, why did you seek therapy? What kinds of symptoms are you experiencing? Have you seen a therapist before? What are your goals for treatment?
Mm.
And what would you like to change about yourself, your life, or your relationships? And are there any specific things that you want to make sure we address? Things like that. After that call, if you feel like it's a good fit and you get, your client scheduled, then, you typically are dealing with paperwork. Super fun, but necessary. Once the paperwork is done, you usually get scheduled for, the intake appointment, which intake appointments, some people choose to have like longer than typical sessions, where typical sessions are like anywhere from 45 minutes to 60 minutes. Some therapists will have intake sessions that are like 90 minutes, 120 minutes if it's couples. A bit rare, I think, but plenty still do. And the reason is basically because in the first session, they just are gathering a bit more information about your background of the problem, the situation you're working with, and working on understanding all of that so that goals can be made and a treatment plan can be made.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, in the first session, it is so normal to feel awkward, to feel nervous, to feel like, what am I supposed to do now? Am I talking? Do I need to wait? Do I need to let them lead? Do I lead? So normal. And really, it's show up with whatever questions you have, honestly and authentically. There's no need to like really prepare, or it's okay to have fear and still go into it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then, the rest of the sessions really are about collaborating on the issues so that you can actually get to where you want to be, whatever your goal was. It's all about building the skills, learning new things, being open to addressing anything from the past that needs to be addressed to move forward, and then just working your way towards practice until you get to the place you want to be. And also, I will say, like, I find that in my sessions, more and more, my clients are all like, can I write this down? I'm like, yes, please write this down. These are all important, helpful stuff. So take notes, just don't record sessions.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's legal. But you can take notes. Okay. Yeah. And the other thing I want to say too about all of this is recognize that no topic is technically off limits, because this is your therapist's job is to just show up wherever you are for whatever you need. So there isn't any specific topic that's off limits, and you absolutely can cry in session, and you absolutely can cuss in session too.
That's I have done both in my sessions.
Exactly. Yes. Be honest. Show up exactly whatever is authentic to you. If your like norm with your friends is to cuss, then feel free to cuss in front of your therapist. There's nothing wrong with that. It's authentic.
There you go.
And if you feel like crying, this is the perfect place to cry, especially because this is a very specific, tailored environment meant for your personal, emotional safety.
Exactly.
And honestly, we therapists I'm willing to bet you've seen it all. We have seen like the pretty cries, the ugly cries, the snot bubble cries. It doesn't matter. Just be yourself. Be in the moment. Feel what you got to feel. We're not fazed by that.
Yeah.
And a competent therapist will definitely not blink an eye. They will make you feel safe enough to be able to cry.
I love that. That shows that you have good rapport too with your therapist, that you feel safe.
Exactly.
You trust your therapist.
Exactly. And it's also important to recognize that, especially for us South Asians, we're often taught to like be super respectful of elders and authority and like don't question them. But no, break that. Question your therapist. If something doesn't feel good, if they say something that hurt your feelings, your therapist is also human. Bring it up. Say something. And if they're a good therapist, they'll take it in stride and they'll genuinely apologize and adjust in kind, right? And even if it's not like they've offended you, they're just trying something that's not quite fitting, it's okay to bring it up. It's their job to help you in a tailored way. So if you don't say, hey, this isn't really working, they're also not going to know.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. They're the expert perhaps on the topics, but you're the expert on your life.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, exactly. And then I also wanted to mention, because this is a frequently asked question I get all the time for new therapy goers, how many sessions do I need? That depends. So usually if it's something that is very like specific to a situation and the client has like pretty good coping skills on their own already, then it might really only take like 10 sessions, maybe 15, depending on the situation. But if it's a complex issue and they're really unlearning a lot of things, they are dealing with a lot of specific goals, there's a lot of layered complexities to what they're working through, then it can take longer. Yeah. And that's okay. There's no right or wrong timeline. There's no, if I do it within this, like I've succeeded. It doesn't work like that. It's very much individual and tailored to you. And I've had clients come see me for 10 sessions about a specific thing and then come back later and see me for like another 10 sessions for another specific thing. Yeah. And that's okay. I've also had some clients who've been with me for 2 years, maybe even a little over 2 years. And that's because that client and clients like her, maybe not as long, maybe a little bit less, like a year, year and a half, because they have very complex things that they're working through. And they're really unlearning so many things that it takes time to do that. Yeah. Doesn't mean that they haven't made progress. She's one of my quote unquote best clients in the sense that she really puts in so much effort outside of therapy that she sees a lot of progress. So it's not about not putting in effort, not practicing, not seeing progress. It's just different. She's working through a lot of things.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's another thing too, I'll say. Sometimes clients have asked me, like, am I doing well for the place I'm in right now? It's hard to answer that. No one is unique. No one is quite like your situation. Everybody's unique, right? So you want to see progress? You just have to put in effort consistently outside of our work together. It's like if you are going to the gym to try and get healthier, try to lower your cholesterol levels, try to lose weight, whatever it is. You're not going to just be able to do that. It takes time and consistent effort to practice that, to keep up with that. Yeah. That's how you see a difference. It's the same thing with therapy too.
Yeah.
Right?
That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought I would talk really quickly, call back to what I said about therapist fit. I want to talk about that real quickly before we talk about our last topic on this. Okay. Some questions to maybe ask yourself in deciding if your therapist is the right fit for you is, do you feel comfortable speaking with this therapist? Do you feel like you have a good rapport, that you can be vulnerable and honest with this therapist? Do you feel like this therapist is trustworthy, likable, respectful, creates open space to just be curious and understand you rather than, feeling judged? Does that therapist seem attentive to your concerns?
That makes sense.
Does this therapist have experience maybe working with clients in similar issues? If the answer is generally yes to all of these questions or most of these questions, you likely have a strong therapeutic alliance, or you're on the way to getting there. That's a pretty good predictor of your outcome for therapy being successful.
Yeah.
But if the answer is no, or just something about your gut is saying, I feel like it's just not working though, just trust your gut. There's plenty of therapists out there. And ultimately, a good therapist just wants you to be getting what you need.
Yeah.
So it's okay. Yeah.
Love it.
I do actually want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
Before we move on to the
Go
next
for it.
topic is
I love it.
What you're going to get out of therapy, right? So if I have to really, truly condense all of the things I think that my clients get out of therapy, it's these couple of things. And this is, again, not comprehensive list. This is just top of the head stuff. You gain resiliency skills. You gain valuable coping skills and the ability to emotionally regulate, which is hugely important skill to have in life. You learn maybe relationship skills like effective communication, boundary setting, how to have a stronger relationship with yourself and with other people. Maybe you gain more self-awareness so you can be more intentional. And if you're more intentional, you can reach your goals more easily. Maybe you just get to treat the symptoms that are impacting the quality of your life. Either way, there's lots of different benefits that therapy can offer. But if you're open to it, to learning, to experimenting, to trying new things like this, definitely you will find that some part of your life is going to be better off.
Yeah.
You'll be better off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's all true.
Okay. Yeah. So the last thing I want to talk about is how South Asians can benefit from therapy.
Okay.
This is my favorite part of this.
I'm ready.
I see a lot of South Asians, so I love this topic. Are you ready?
Yes.
Yes, let's get into it. So I feel like to start off talking about how South Asians can benefit from it, we first need to address why it's difficult to seek out therapy as a South Asian. Direct quote, maybe a little bit fudged because it's been a while, my memory's not great. But my mom, when I told her I would be seeking therapy, the first thing she said to me was, oh, okay, why therapy? You can always talk to me. Aren't I enough? And I don't know if that's exactly how she phrased it, but that's what she said. And this is, things that she said similarly in the past too. And so, it didn't like throw me off guard or anything, but I was like, of course you're enough, Mom. But it's not that simple, right? When you have a parent or sometimes even friends, anyone that you know personally talk to you, they're so invested, they lose the ability to be unbiased.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's something to consider, right? And Psychology Today, also did a piece specifically written by a South Asian and things that, this South Asian therapist has heard. And I want to talk about those other things as well. She talks about how, to kind of echo what I said, the don't we provide enough for you?
Yeah.
You went to an excellent school. You have a great job. What could you possibly have to seek in therapy? Don't you have enough, right? Sometimes, family members have trouble supporting or fully understanding the debilitating mental health challenges because they're coming from a different generation. They're coming from a generation that has likely had to survive and not been given opportunities to thrive. Yes. So when you're in survival mode, you don't see what maybe are the gaps. You don't see what maybe are the things that maybe aren't working for you. You're just stuck in it because you're too busy surviving. But whether intentional or unintentional, our parents have given us the ability to thrive. So when these problems arise and they don't understand why they're coming up, they get maybe a little bit frustrated. Maybe they take it personally. They can get defensive about their parenting or even like the social stigma, right? The lo kya kahenge.
Right.
If you do seek it out. Are you weak? Am I weak? Have I not done a good job raising you? Have I not made you resilient? Those kinds of things come up. Not to mention, this South Asian therapist, really brings up a really good point about how there's a huge emphasis in our culture on gratitude for one's blessings, for respect of the wisdom of our elders. All true. And gratitude is definitely a powerful healing emotion and can be tremendously helpful in building inner resources, building, the resiliency that we talk about. But that call for gratitude can sometimes come with a guilt trip, right? If the emphasis is leaning on one's family and taking advice of elders, while that can be helpful, it can be a double-edged sword. If the inherent family dysfunctions are overlooked or even excused in service of this blind obedience, right? So I want to also address something that they talked about in this article, and that is like reframing these like 5 common myths. One of them is that mental health is just as valid as physical health. That's not the myth, that's the reframe version.
Right.
Mental health is just as valid as physical health because they impact one another. You cannot have one independent of the other.
Right.
And you wouldn't hesitate to go to the doctor if you have a broken arm. So seeking therapy is also vital to those who are struggling with anything, mood, adjustment to something, a change, anxiety, depression, anything. And it's not an indication of weakness. It's a recognition that there's a problem and a professional can help fix it. Another reframe is that mental health challenges are not simply negative feelings. They actually are symptoms that need attention. So the experience of depression or anxiety goes far beyond the idea of, oh, they're just sad or they're just nervous. It requires the skill of a trained professional to help diagnose and alleviate symptoms if it truly is depression, anxiety. Feeling sad and feeling nervous are temporary emotions. If you're consistently feeling other symptoms in addition to feeling sad and unable to get out of it, that's not just sadness, it's depression. There's a difference between family advice and professional dialogue. It's important to recognize that when familial advice is no longer sufficient, then professional help is called for. Family will always play a critical role, though. They can help or hinder a person in their process. They can either be helpful and supportive, or you can continue to let your loved ones suffer in silence, and that will just make it worse.
Yeah.
Another important thing to recognize is playing the guilt card can exacerbate the problem. It's important, especially in our South Asian culture, to become aware of the generational trauma and the subconscious guilt we often carry and pass on. Guilt-inducing reactions can worsen symptoms and create feelings of hopelessness and despair and prevent grown children, adults, from seeking help. And seeking help is absolutely a sign of strength, not weakness.
Yes.
Our cultural ethos are filled with heroes and heroines whose fortitude and silent suffering mark them as icons of admiration and worship. But the world we inhabit has changed. It's infinitely more nuanced, complex, and multicultural. And as South Asians, we need to redefine what it means to be strong. That's a direct quote. I absolutely love that. No change there.
Love it.
The last thing I'll say about all of this is maybe an example of common examples of what South Asians I've worked with have come to seek therapy for. So this is most often what I see. I see people come in for low self-esteem and confidence, conflict in their family that they need help navigating, guidance through any life transitions, any changes that are happening, developing emotional intelligence where they feel they lack, learning how to communicate more effectively is a huge one, learning to strengthen the relationship with themselves and others is also a huge one. Any relationship problems that they have, in couples, body image issues, breaking intergenerational trauma, breaking cycles they're stuck in, when they're experiencing anxiety, when they're experiencing depression, when they have a desire to stop people pleasing, when they just want to learn skills like communication skills, coping skills, emotional regulation skills, how to set boundaries, and definitely for things like processing and healing trauma, whether they're aware of those traumas or not. And I will say also, usually most of my clients have a history of burying their feelings until it becomes really, really uncappable. It's just an ugly resentment that's constantly there. It's an uncontrollable anger or rage. And it tends to frustrate and confuse them. And they're like, I don't know why I've changed like this. I don't know why it's coming up. To guide them through understanding all of that, healing what needs to be healed and moving forward. These are some of the most common things that I've seen people reach out for.
I love it. Look at all of those people breaking cycles. Woohoo!
I know. Yeah. Phew. That was a lot of content, wasn't it?
It was good. Very informative, though. Very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope so. I think that was a lot of content, though. So let's dive into the story so we can wrap up.
Yes.
To talk about my experience and my journey through therapy, the first time I sought out therapy was, as I've talked about it a bunch on this podcast, it was when I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. And I don't know what came first, but depression is a part of hypothyroidism, the symptom of it, and I definitely was feeling it. So I decided, with some pushing from my lovely friends, to seek out therapy. And of course, I was very scared. I was nervous.
Yeah.
But I was also kind of feeling hopeless. Would this even do anything? Am I going to really feel better? And I also felt like I kind of had to hide it, mainly because I didn't know anybody who went to therapy before. I had no one I knew, friends or family, obviously, who went. And so I felt like I hit rock bottom. I kind of felt like a failure, I couldn't figure this out. I didn't know how to deal with anything. I need the help.
Yeah.
Just like I said, when I talked to my mom, she was kind of like, but why? I'm here. Am I not enough? And so that kind of unintentional guilting kind of made me feel why do I need this? Why have I let myself get this far? But I had a wonderful experience, and it was absolutely one of the most transformational experiences of my life.
Yay.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
That's amazing.
And, initially when I had went, I had all the classic, symptoms of depression, but in addition to that, I was also dealing with like body image issues, low self-esteem, lots of people pleasing. I was definitely one of those people who had buried my feelings until it absolutely erupted into like uncontrollable rage, and then guilt and shame for that rage.
Yeah.
Not to mention relationship problems, communication issues, poor coping skills, poor emotional regulation skills. I had everything you could possibly think of in that moment going on for me. But I had a really wonderful therapist. I felt like I had a pretty good rapport with her, and it really helped me learn how to validate my own feelings, how to make space for my emotions, how to not be mad at myself or judge myself for having some of the like ickier emotions. And I learned how to break my all or nothing thinking, understand myself better, and communicate what I understand about myself. Communicate my needs, my wants better too. And while I did have to explain myself a little bit because she was a white therapist and like she didn't understand necessarily all the expectations I felt pressured by, she was open. She was willing to meet me where I was. And she did not give the thing that we joke about as therapists, like that, oh, okay, well then just cut your parents off. She didn't give me that advice. If she did, I would have been like, you don't get it, bye. But that was instrumental in me feeling like I could say what I needed to say, be vulnerable in the way I needed to really understand myself and have a good therapy experience. Of course, being a therapist, I also learned a lot of skills and like educational things through learning it from my clients, right? That was also a big one. And then I also have some experience with couples therapy.
Okay.
I was also very nervous and scared to share, like, not just, I mean, I already had experience sharing with a therapist, so I knew how powerful that would be. But I had a whole other fear, not just of sharing my innermost thoughts and vulnerabilities, but sharing it with my partner. And like, what would my partner think of my most unfiltered, icky thoughts that I'm not proud of? And that was really, really scary experience too. But ultimately, the therapist helped us kind of facilitate that conversation between one another, learn how to speak our truths to one another, and how to sit with the disappointment of maybe what your partner said even. So I learned so many important like relationship skills through couples therapy, skills that I have not seen modeled to me through other like people's relationships I've seen. And so I think that's like the one thing I make sure I always tell clients who call me looking for couples therapy for the first time is it's not your fault. We're not often modeled important, healthy relationship skills.
Right.
That's okay. That's why you're here now, to learn those things. And this is like not your fault. You just weren't taught it. How can you know something you're not taught?
Exactly.
To take away that like shame and that guilt that we might feel. But while it's still very much a work in progress, we're a lot stronger, and we have learned a lot more.
Yay.
But it's still not perfect. It doesn't need to be. We just need to keep trying.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that is my long-winded journey through therapy, educational and story.
No, I love it though. Like, it's hearing your perspective, not just as a professional, but like practicing also what you preach, right? Like you're doing it as a work, but also you have sought it out for yourself, for your relationship, for you and your partner. I think that's so inspirational. Like not only you're doing this work like as a professional and breaking like helping so many people break cycles, right? Empowering so many people out there, especially South Asians, but you're a pioneer in it yourself. Like you said, you didn't, when you first started, like you didn't really know people around you or people in your family that started it or did it. And you, despite that, maybe fear or unknown or uncertainty, you still did it. You were a pioneer, and look at that. That's amazing.
Exactly. Yeah. And I make sure now, at least having gone through it, now I make sure like, I'm like, oh yeah, I've been to therapy. I've done couples therapy. We have both worked on it. We try to do that as much as we can.
To normalize it.
So that if we normalize it, hopefully anybody who needs it in our family will say, I want to do it.
I love it. That's so amazing.
And we have actually 2 examples. I won't say who, I won't call them out on the podcast because it's, their privacy, but 2 people in a family have sought therapy after we talked about it. I don't know if it had anything to do with us, but it's
it
nice to
can
know that
be.
maybe,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe.
That's so amazing. How inspiring.
Yeah,
Yay.
yeah,
I love
yay.
that. I had no idea about that. That's so good to hear. Look,
Yeah,
and you like
yeah.
probably don't even realize how many people you have inspired. Like your clients, like think about like the tree of knowledge. Like you're helping your clients,
Yeah.
break those cycles. What about those clients' loved ones and their family members and their friends? Like how many people are they inspiring to seek out therapy?
Yeah.
So
definitely. And I definitely have like one client who I've been helping her navigate unlearning unhelpful things around like dating and like really going after what she deserves, and like specific things that we've talked about she's encouraged her brother to do, and I'm like,
yeah.
Amazing.
I love it so much. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate it. I feel like I learned a lot of new things today that I did not know before. So I'm excited. Okay. I'm excited to
hear
talk
your
about
journey.
Yes, I'm so excited. And you know this, and everybody who is listening that know me, I will always talk about this. I have not stopped talking about this ever since I started therapy. And so I'm so excited to share my story and my journey through therapy. So just to give a little bit of background about my journey, I first started therapy in February of 2022, so very recent and way in my adult years. And so now I've been going to therapy like consistently for a little over 2 years now. And I'm not just saying this, like it literally is the best decision I had ever made. And backtracking a little bit, kind of like how I got into starting therapy, I would say that I was talking about therapy for probably over a year, like wanting to start therapy. But I didn't just get to it. And I don't think like I'm the type of person that's a go-getter. Like I will do something when I set my mind to it, but this was not the case. And I think that attributes to how much of a taboo it is in our community and our culture. You talked about a little bit in my household and family and the culture I grew up in. Therapy is done if one is diagnosed with mental illness. Like it's not really talked about if a person is not has a diagnosis. Like why are you doing therapy? Like it's not for everyone. Everyone doesn't need it. If you are struggling with something or having a hard time coping, you need to turn to your elders, like you mentioned. You need to turn to religion. Like that was the expectation. Like pray and you'll be okay, or like do this and you'll be okay, or sleep and you'll be okay. Right? Those were the things that I would hear a lot. And of course, now I'll say I disagree with that. And of course, in the moment too, when I would hear those things, it was hard, like you mentioned. Like I had a little bit of inspiration because my little sister was the one who had been doing therapy for a while before me. So she was definitely my inspiration to go Gen Z. But other than that, like there was not really any other people that I knew, that loved ones, like at least in my family, where my parents knew, who my parents knew, where they were like, okay, yeah, like this is normalized, and it's not. And I think now 50% of our household, right, 4-person family that I grew up in, we do therapy. And so that's kind of normalized in a way. Like me and my sister kind of talk about it with their parents all the time. And so that was kind of like the start of like me trying to unlearn and deconstruct all these concepts of like therapy can be beneficial even if you don't have like a specific mental illness or diagnosis. Like you said, it could help with emotional regulation. And so the reason why I thought about therapy for a while was because I started recognizing that I had very disruptive behaviors, like overthinking patterns that would really take over so much of my time and energy on a day-to-day basis. And some of these thinking patterns were like disruptive in like my daily life. Like I wasn't able to be the optimal person I want to be because of those thinking patterns. And it was a lot of like overthinking, rumination, catastrophizing. And a reason why I was very adamant about starting in that time period was because I knew I was going to get married soon. And I really wanted to be the best version I can for myself and my partner. And that was like really important to me, is that I want to do kind of at least get a year of therapy in or more to kind of work through a lot of the trauma that I faced growing up and kind of undo and unlearn all these disruptive thinking patterns that I developed, the overthinking, the people pleasing, lots of different things that you talked about that I had dealt with and I sometimes still deal with, right? It was really important to me was to show up with the best version of myself for my partner when I'm doing this new life transitions. And then, like, of course, like in our culture, like, you're joining a new family too. And so that was really important to me, was like, how can I be the best version of myself for my partner and his family, my family? So that was really important to me. So once I kind of sat down and I was like, okay, we're doing this, I was tried to seek out, just like Google and like talk to people who've done therapy on how to find the best fit or the best therapist, because I was very, very adamant about finding that right fit to maximize effects and like the important, like, just like it was really important for me to have that rapport, to have that relationship. And so I know I've talked about this with you, right? I was recommended Psychology Today directory, and something that was really cool was that you can filter for ethnicity, you can filter for your insurance company, and you can filter for your city, your zip code. Something that I was okay with too was virtual. And so that opened up even more of like the pool of South Asian therapists, because that was important to me, as finding someone who is South Asian. And so I would eliminate kind of explaining the values and the culture piece. And so I filtered for South Asian. I wanted someone who was identified as female. I wanted someone, like, I filtered for like the different coping challenges, like overthinking, anxiety, anxious thoughts, improving relationships. That was something that was a goal for me too, like improving my relationship with my parents. And so I kind of filtered for that, filtered for insurance, filtered for ethnicity, filtered for like, I was okay with online therapy. So that was like anywhere in Texas. That way that my insurance worked was, if you do virtual therapy, you can have anyone in Texas. And so I found kind of some, like, a lot of list of searches came up, and I started reviewing these like back, like it was kind of like a LinkedIn profile page. Like you click on the name after the directory pulls it up, and they have like their headshot, they have like a little summary, they have like bulleted specialties, what they specialize in, modalities. And then what was really nice about Psychology Today, in my experience, was that it showed like a ribbon where it was like, you can do a free consultation, like call this number or email. And so that's what I did. I was like, let me just, before I schedule any sessions, I want to do that free 15-minute phone call to kind of get to know the therapist, like you said, and see if they're a good fit, like we're a good fit for each other. And my sister actually gave me good advice about this, was like, she did this where she told me to create a list of questions that I would ask each therapist that I would speak with during the consultation. And so a lot of those questions were like you mentioned, like, what modalities do you do? Something that was important to me was like the psychoanalysis, like the retrospective thinking, like looking into my childhood and really understanding what happened and how is that related to like my current challenges that I am facing. And then of course the solution focus. So like that integrative, holistic approach was really important to me. So that was like part of my questions. And then I can't remember, those were like the main questions, but I do remember like conversing with these therapists and kind of really getting a feel out of them. Like there was one therapist that looked amazing on paper, but then some of the answers that I got, I didn't really like appreciate, or didn't really sit right with me. And so sometimes like the people pleaser in me felt bad, right? Like even in this process, you can be like, I should probably just still go with them because we spoke on the phone. But like, no, like this is for you and you only, and this will only be as effective as you, like the work you put in for it. And so, the people pleasing that can happen, which happened with me, like can get in the way sometimes, but it's important to be like, nope, this doesn't sit right. I'm going to keep going. And so my current therapist, we clicked really well. Our conversation it felt so like we were partners. And that's how I feel too. Like me and my therapist are working together to kind of build my coping skills, to regulate my emotions, to kind of make sure those thinking patterns and disruptive overthinking that was happening becomes almost non-existent. Helps me create a toolbox. I've talked about that in previous episodes, right? Like my coping toolbox. And so that's how I kind of found my therapist that I'm currently seeing in the last 2 years. And it has been really helpful. And I will say, like 2 years ago, Michelle, and now, like night and day difference. And it's like, it's amazing and very transformational. Like you said, like those overthinking patterns that I started out with, the disruptive thinking is like almost non-existent. I think there were a lot of the self-work that I did also like helped me regulate my emotions. My people pleasing tendencies have gone down. I've learned how to set boundaries. Something this also was like a non-intentional way of therapy that supported me was I face a lot of secondhand trauma in my work. So working with patients and families diagnosed with oncology. And so therapy had really helped me cope with that. So there's just so many benefits. My like relationship with my family has improved. My communication with my family and my loved ones has improved. And so I'm just really happy with the results. Recently, my therapist has quote unquote graduated me. She'll laugh at this if she hears this. I've told you this too, to like every other week.
Yeah.
We used to do every week, so now we're trialing every other week. And it's great, but I will say, like you said, right, the goal of therapy is not, it's for you to become independent. And so I understand, because that's what I do with my patients at work, right? Like I want them to be independent and coping with their medical experience. But I will say it's really nice to know that therapy is a tool that exists, because when traumatic experiences do occur after therapy has been set in place and has exists with the tool, like you have your therapist, even if you don't see them as often, you can reach out to them and be like, hey, this just happened in my life. Can we move up our appointment? Or, hey, like this just happened. I really need to speak with you. Like, when's your next availability? And, you know, I did have a traumatic experience while I was doing therapy. Like my apartment was broken into, thankfully not when I was in it, but like it was really nice that I was able to just quickly text her and be like, hey, this just happened. Like, can we move up our appointment? Can you meet tomorrow? And it was just really great that I had that tool with me to help cope with that traumatic experience. So that's kind of like my little take on my journey of therapy, and kind of just to go back of like how it has trickled down to like my parents and my loved ones. Like I keep going back to like my dream and hope is that I want my parents to experience what I experienced, right? Like I want them to go to therapy. But this is something I've talked about it in my own therapy sessions too. Like it's important to understand like we can't make them, right? We can model. And then literally last night, of course, I was scrolling through on Instagram when I'm supposed to be sleeping. I saw an Instagram post that directly related to this, and I was really moved by it. I'm not going to directly quote it because I don't remember exactly what it said, but it said that change for our parents can be overwhelming, and people find comfort in the familiar, even if that familiar isn't the best situation. So instead of constantly pushing my parents to change, right, and people pleasing them or putting like all my energy like into convincing them to like, you need to do this, you need to do this, I can focus on fostering a healthy relationship with the skills that I've built in therapy with them and be the best version of myself for them, right? Like I can model it for them and hope that this will kind of inspire them to maybe, if not like going to therapy, like practicing this coping skills that I am, like adopting them themselves. So that's kind of like my therapy journey.
Beautiful. I love that.
Yes.
You know, I really didn't know about your people pleasing coming up during consult calls, but I just want to take a moment and say I'm so proud of you, because even before you did the work, you were able to, at least in this specific area, be like, put your foot down and say, no, I deserve to have the right fit for me.
Yes. And but it's really important. Like I recognize that. I was like in the end of the call, I was like, okay, I'll call you back, but I knew I wasn't going to. Like
that's okay.
And I didn't. I felt bad, but like it's true. Like, you know, it does come in the way, even with things like this. Like you mentioned, like my first session, I was so nervous. I didn't know what to say. And literally my therapist, my intake session, she just said, tell me more about yourself. And then told my whole life story. And like that was really important to me too, is that in my first session, I kind of wanted to lay out, like kind of give her context, like what my experiences look like. Here's the chronological order. And to your point about like, you know, South Asian parents, especially like saying religion or am I not enough, like all of that. Like I did face that too when I told my parents I was starting therapy. And something that I did say back was like, you are enough. I really love you. But but these are people who went to school to help people cope with different experiences. That's why I'm doing this, is because I need professional help to become the best version of myself. And I think that like helped them understand, right? Like I feel like in the South Asian community, education is so valued. And so really helping our loved ones understand that, hey, our loved ones understand, like, hey, this is a professional thing. Like, this is something that they studied for years and years and years. Like, this is all research based. This is important. This is effective. And then actually doing it. And I think I've told you this too. I don't think I've said this on the podcast. The questions that I created, like, I've forwarded that email so many times because I talk about it all the time at work. Like, oh, I do therapy, like with all my coworkers. So I don't remember the exact number, but I've definitely forwarded that email at least 20 times to 20 different people. So it's
I don't know
really
if you remember, nice. I actually asked you to forward that to me as well because I had a lot of new clients reach out to me who weren't right fits for me, but I wanted to help them find a good fit for them. So when they were like, what kind of questions should I ask? And this was like way when I was more of a newbie too. I was like, Michelle, what did you ask your therapist? Tell me so I can tell these other clients.
Oh, I love it. That's so funny because my therapist, I do now that you mention it. Yeah. My therapist did the same thing. She was like,
really?
Do you mind if I share the questions with other clients? I was like, yeah, go for it. I forwarded already so many times. Like, more the merrier.
Yeah. You did a really good job. You and your sister did a wonderful job of, really understanding that you guys deserve to have, like, everyone deserves to have the right fit for them.
Right.
But that means you can question the therapist too.
Right.
How else are you going to know?
Exactly. And then the key piece here too that I wanted to mention was like how much of a growth mindset a person needs to have and how much of a motivation that needs to have, like, to be able to want to start therapy, go into therapy intentionally for it to be effective, right? Like, you can start therapy because your parents told you to do it or your friend told you to do it, but you're not interested in it, you're not motivated, like, nothing might come out of it. And so that even is such a big step. And I think that's why sometimes there's people like me that I've learned about how much time it takes to even take the step to start therapy is because that taboo that we experience, but all, like, we notice in our community and society in general too, not just in the South Asian community, but also like that growth mindset that's needed, like accepting, like that was the biggest piece for me, was accepting that I needed help. Like that was the hardest hurdle, the biggest hurdle. Like, hey, like this is something that I want to change. So let's accept that this is something that needs to be changed and let's do something about it.
Yeah. And recognizing that that's just your strength, and recognizing you have a need, you meet the need. You get sick, you take medicine. You feel you need some help, you seek the help.
There you go.
Yeah. I'm so proud of you. I know, I remember those days, and we talked back and forth. We both need to find a therapist to discuss all these things. I remember we went on and on and on. And I'm just so proud of you for really just keeping at it, even if it took you a while. That's okay. I mean, you still kept it at the forefront of your mind, and you kept checking in with yourself and kept trying to motivate yourself, and eventually it found its right time for you. So I'm proud of you.
I'm proud of you
even
too.
Though you were saying it took me a while, it's okay. You still did it. You took the step. And I've seen what a difference it's made in you too. Because as your friend, I absolutely want the best for you. And sometimes I notice your people-pleasing tendencies getting in the way. So I love that you can now be like, you know what? I deserve this. It's fine. Like, I can see yourself, like, vocally or internally have this, like, dialogue and then choose what's best for you. And I'm like, yes, I love that for you.
It's amazing. It really is. I do agree with what you said, how therapy is transformational. And I'm so proud of you too. Like, coping with all the things that you've had to cope with. I'm sure, like, that motivation piece, right? Especially when someone is undergoing and experiencing depression, that's like the biggest piece is missing motivation. And having to get out of that and take that step for yourself is really important. And then I love that you kind of mentioned about couples counseling, because that's, again, is very, very taboo, I think, even more so just individual therapy, I would say, in my experience.
Absolutely.
And, I could already, like, anytime we mention couples counseling, I can hear the aunties whispering. You know what I mean? Like, that's how how it is in our community.
How taboo it is.
Yeah. But I love that you guys are normalizing it, because it's so important to normalize it. No couple is perfect. No two partners are perfect. And it's okay to seek professional support to make a relationship work.
Yeah. Absolutely. And in fact, it's more like a marriage thing. You know?
Yeah.
Oh, you're seeking couples counseling. You want to strengthen your relationship because you love each other that much. Amazing.
There you go.
That's so great.
Reframing
Like,
it.
why don't
Yeah.
we think about it like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was my
Well,
story.
this was a really fun topic. I
Yes.
think this was our longest one yet.
I know. Of course, I'm not surprised.
There's just so much to say.
There
And
is.
honestly, having done the research, I can say I still left out some things because interest of time.
Yeah.
So it's a fun topic though. You want to see us out?
Yes. Okay. So, to our amazing listeners out there, thank you again for your support so far. We really appreciate each and every one of you. If this resonated with you, this topic, or you wanted to share your journey through therapy, or just any thoughts or feedback, please reach out to us to our email, talksouthasiantome@gmail.com, or you can reach us to our socials, which is the handle at talksouthasiantome. All right. Y'all take care. Bye.
See you next time.